Hi everyone, welcome to another comics loving edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. It is a pleasure on this episode to be talking with comics creator Mark Chiarello. Mark, thank you for jumping in, joining, and taking a few minutes to talk with me.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure.
I will start out by mentioning a couple of titles that I encountered of yours first, a couple of works that have been part of my reading journey. And so I was a big Elseworlds fan in the 90s. And so Batman Houdini being one of those that I know that you worked on. You worked on an amazing adaptation of Francis, Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula as well, which was Mike Mignola. I think that was the first work by Mike Mignola that I ever saw.
Hmm.
Um, Batman the Spirit, more recently before Watchmen, and just an amazing range of work. So, and I think that was only the B's, the mostly the B list from your work. There's an entire alphabet of material that you've worked on. So, those are some of my favorites, but I know that you probably have your own favorites as well and positive experiences that you'll be sharing about.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for mentioning some of that stuff.
Absolutely. Uh, so I usually like to start out by asking kind of a question of what's connected you with visual storytelling. What is it about comics that made you kind of go, okay, this is the place that I want to be working in, and this is where I want to use my talents.
Sure. Well, like so many kids that grew up in the 60s and 70s, network television was everything,
Hmm
The Brady Bunch and I Love Lucy reruns and all that stuff. And I think you really start to soak that stuff up subliminally. You're definitely not a 10-year-old kid saying, "Hey, this is teaching me story structure." It doesn't work that way, you
hmm
know.
hmm
Um, but you realize story structure, beginning, middle, end, and then you sort of gravitate towards uh, slightly more advanced television shows like Columbo, which play with the medium, play with the way to tell a story. And then you get into movies and, Lawrence of Arabia and Planet of the Apes and all the stuff you see as a kid. Um, and hopefully you get a little more sophisticated in your approach to what you like. And because movies are so visual, you can't help but if you have it, if you're an artist, if you have any sense of graphics or storytelling or picture making, um, you can't help but love that stuff. And when I was a kid, and I apologize, I know I'm all over the place with this
No,
answer.
no,
When I
you're
was
fine. You're fine.
Okay, when I was a kid, the Adam West Batman TV show was such a monstrous hit. It was we all waited. I think it was Wednesdays or Tuesdays. We all waited for that, and um, then you realize, hey, wait a minute, this is from a comic book. I've
Hmm
seen comic books at the 7-Eleven or at the local drugstore or the cigar shop. So you start buying that stuff. And I was fortunate enough to start reading comics, um, Marvel comics purely. I was a Marvel nut, which is ironic that I ended up working at DC Comics for almost 30 years as
Yeah.
their art director. Um, that's a whole different conversation. But, I was fortunate because comics were great. They were so great. Then you had some great writers, Denny O'Neil, Archie Goodwin, Jerry Conway. But for me, the visuals just locked me in. I would often buy comics and not even read them. I would just buy them for the artwork.
hmm
And, you know, I to this day, I'll still go to the comic shop once in a while and pick up something that there's some great artists working in the business. And so I think the moral of the story is, simple television went to complex television, went to movies, went to comics for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Yeah. And um, I mentioned several of my favorites there, but any particular mile markers in your experience, things that you look back on especially fondly?
As a fan, those Marvel artists of the 60s and 70s, I just adore Gene Colan and Jim Steranko. What a brilliant graphic designer and storyteller he was.
Hmm
I was a real big John Romita fan because Spider-Man was my guy. Spider-Man was my character. I think to this day he's still my favorite character. Yeah, I look through my old comics collection all the time, and wow, remember this one? And it was nostalgia, and I have to give Stan credit. Although I don't think Stan wrote much of that stuff. I think it was the artist working on that. But again, that's a that's a fist fight conversation we shouldn't get into.
Right, right.
I give Stan a lot of credit for really trumpeting uh, the material, the characters, and therefore the artists.
Mhm.
Jack Kirby just a genius. And after as I grew up a bit, I started looking around outside of Marvel to see what other comics, and I really got into the old Warren black and white comics, creepy and eerie.
Mhm,
And you
mhm.
had the best artists on the planet drawing that stuff. And I became a big Alex Toth fan, who is sort of my god, uh, as it were.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, a lot of great memories. I mean, that's as a fan, a lot of different memories as an art director on staff at DC Comics.
Hmm, hmm. What was it like to go from sort of reader to professional in that way?
Uh, the well, um, there was a real learning curve, because as a fan you're like, oh man, let's do this. I know Batman isn't supposed to kill anybody, but let's have the one comic where Batman does kill somebody. Well, no, you can't do that, because
Right, right.
you're really the custodian of these characters. And Paul Levitt said it one time. He said, the fans are important, getting a paycheck is important, um, telling the story is important, but the most important thing is the characters. You
Hmm.
have to treat the characters with respect. And that has stuck in my head. And working on Batman, one of my absolute favorite characters, and Superman, you can't. I think for years there was the desire to adultize these characters, or update these, or grit up these characters. And yeah, Frank Miller did that well.
Hmm.
Um, with Dark Knight Returns, but not everybody's Frank Miller. And I think unfortunately, you had the characters were mistreated a bit by some creators.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so it's nice to see that come back around. I worked with a guy named Darwin Cook
Mm-hmm.
for a while, and he really put it back in my head. No, that's not what the original, you know, that's not what the original creators wanted for the Flash or wanted for Green Lantern. So we really, working with him or Jeff Loeb or Tim Sale, Adam Hughes, those were the artists who and writers who really did embrace those characters in the core. You're telling a morality tale, and
Hmm.
that makes all that makes all the sense in the world to me, actually.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Darwin Cook was just an amazing artist, amazing visual storyteller.
He really was. He was a great draftsman. He was a kooky guy. I'm sorry that he passed away years ago. I really miss him. Um, he uh, he was a great artist, but I think he was an even better writer
Hmm,
than an
hmm.
artist. He was great as a writer. He understood story structure and what you're trying to tell with these characters, using these characters.
Yeah, yeah. You might have just kind of tipped to this answer, but I was curious about kind of the direction that you like to take in your work and sort of the creative vision that you like to share.
Yeah, everybody's different. Certainly, everyone's different, and um, I think adult comics are great. I think Vertigo put out some. Karen Berger and Shelley Bond put out some great stuff for Vertigo, but that's not my cup of tea. I
Mhm.
don't. I might be old fashioned and the grandfather of the club, or, the corny one, but I never drew anything as an illustrator, as a painter. I never worked on anything that I couldn't show my parents.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just, and I don't foist that on other creators, but that's just who I am. Um,
Mm.
I think you could tell some great. I think the best comics are all age comics,
Hmm,
that
hmm.
aren't childish, or they're not written down to people. Um, but if, like we're talking about Darwin Cook, He did New Frontier. You can give New Frontier to any age person,
Yeah.
11 years old or 60 years old, and they're both going to get it and enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other creative talents or people along the way that were especially helpful or warm collaborations that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, when I started, my first job in comics was as assistant to Archie Goodwin
Mm-hmm.
at Marvel slash Epic. Um, um, when I've done podcasts in the past, I've mentioned Archie. He was the best writer I've ever met. He was the best editor I've ever met. Although Mike Carlin would probably want to fight me over that one. Uh, he was such a funny guy. Look, I had a great dad, but Archie was my surrogate father. I learned so much from him. He was on a daily basis. He was such a great talent and a great guy. Um, and then and then going over to DC, I was only at Marvel for like a year and a half, and then I went back to freelance art and then illustration, and then started at DC and was there for I think 27 years.
Hmm.
And man, you asked that question, who are the people that made impacts on you? So many people. Adam Hughes, a great pal, Adam Hughes. Tim Sale, I really miss Timmy. What a sweetheart and a great artist, great storyteller. Dave Johnson and Howard Shake. I mean, the list goes on forever and ever. It's some really great people. And what's fun about that is I got to meet and hang out with and work with my heroes, John Buscema and John Romita and Jim Steranko and Jose
Hmm.
Garcia Lopez. I've been really, really fortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. You're one of a nice collection of folks who has uh, kind of given tribute to Archie Goodwin on the show as well, and just spoken of how kind he was and welcoming and supportive.
Yeah, he really was. He really was. Again, another guy who passed way too early, way too young. But I guess that's the way of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I have one more official question that I
Okay.
usually hit on, and then we can hit anything that we might have missed that you want to share. And I always like to ask about current creative directions, and that could be anything from current stories that you're telling. I've had people talk about jazz music they're creating.
Hmm.
An interview earlier this week talked about building a second floor on his house. So it's a pretty open question as far as creativity. But then also spaces where people can go and kind of check out more about you and your work. Any particular places that you like to connect with readers?
Sure. Um, it is an interesting journey as I look back on stuff on my career and where it is now. I'm back to being a full-time illustrator after all these years,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I I'm just and I was always one of those artists who never really enjoyed drawing. It was always like, oh my God, the blank page. What am I going to do? For the first time ever, and I'm in my early 60s, I'm really enjoying drawing. And uh, I'm doing a Batman job right now, and which is with Jeff Loeb. It's top secret, so don't tell anybody. Uh,
Hmm.
it's so much fun to actually draw comics. And years ago, 30 years ago, when I did Batman Houdini, it was frightening. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what to do. But now I'm sort of integrating all those things I learned as an art director and the
Yeah.
things I would tell artists. No, don't do this. Make sure you tell this. What's the time frame from panel A to, all that stuff. I'm integrating that into my own artwork, and that's
Yeah.
into telling that Batman story, and that's really, really fun. That's really cool.
Nice.
Um,
Nice.
yeah,
Looking forward to seeing that.
yeah. I'm digging it. I mean, I hope when people see it, they don't go, "Yeah, you were a better art director than an artist." But no, it's fun. It's been really fun. And I still do a bunch of illustration. I just art directed for a video game company for the last 7 months, and um, that was really fun. I enjoyed being an art director because you got to work again. You got to work with so many talented people,
Hmm.
and the fact that I am an artist, I think that the artists I was working with as an art director, being an art director, I think they sort of respected that. Hey, Mark is not just talking;
Hmm. Hmm.
Don't do this, do that. He could actually do it. So I think that helped me as an art director all those years.
Yeah, yeah, you had that buy-in and um, the reputation.
Yeah, yeah, thanks.
Hmm.
And that's where projects like Wednesday Comics and Solo and Batman Black and White. That's why those were so fun because I could call Otomo, the guy who created Akira, and Jim Lee and all these so many artists I can't even remember them. It was fun. It was a fun run as art director, but again, I'm really thankful that I'm enjoying what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and all the experience is just it's welded into your DNA at this point. So it makes sense that as you go to the page, you're bringing all that with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that last part is conventions, spaces to connect, or online spaces, things like that. Anything that you'd like to mention in that regard?
I rarely do conventions because I did them for so many years
Hmm.
as the DC art director. Um, I think I did 28 San Diego cons in a row.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'd be happy not to walk on that floor for a couple more years. Also, the other thing is I'm just now starting to put out work as an artist, and I don't want to. I'm still invited to quite a few conventions, and I don't want to sit there and nobody knows who I am. Oh, wasn't he the art director? No. So the next year when all this stuff is out,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
then I'll start going to conventions again. I People can see my stuff on my Instagram page.
Hmm.
I think it's MarkChidC, Mark Chi DC on Instagram. I usually post stuff on there that I'm allowed to post.
That's that's the best use for Instagram, honestly. Honestly.
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah, yeah. All the people I follow are artists. I
Yeah.
don't I don't gab with people. I just look at their art, and I guess they look at mine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mark, did we miss anything that you want to make sure to share before we close out?
No, I guess that's it. I'm glad we touched on storytelling, how important that is. That's everything to
Hmm.
movies, television, comics. You can't come back to that enough. That's what everything's about.
Yeah, yeah. And the visual I'm getting tells the story because around you are all of these books and characters and all of these shout outs to storytelling. So I appreciate that very much
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mark. May the creating continue and looking forward to seeing the work that's on the way.
Thanks, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Sounds great.
All right, cool.